All right, it is indeed a very, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is the 28th of March 2023, tarehe 28 mwezi wa 3 mwaka 2023. Natumai kwamba uko salama, you woken up well and you are ready. Start of your week. Just give ni kama wiki inaanza Tuesday. Wala ambao wako Nairobi. In other parts of the country, of course it's Tuesday. In Nairobi, it's Monday. Good Monday to you. A good Tuesday, which is Monday, the 28th of March 2023. Hope you're well and you're keeping well and you're also keeping safe and warm. Nairobi pia ni baridi na kuna kaoma kanazunguka. You kama imefika pale kwa kina Winnie, but there's kaoma which is moving around in Nairobi, so ensure that you can stay safe and also stay warm and stay where you can also feel to be safe. Mimi barabara nyingi ziko hapa ni kama watu walikuwa wanajenga. Kuna mawe hapa kidogo ya mjengo. Nimepitia mahali fulani nimeona pia bado kuna kamoto kanawaka. And I think also it's time, as Kenyans, we started having a very serious discussion on the stability and the safety of our nation as it is. But anyway, that is a conversation for another time or later. But it is the State of the Nation edition, the 28th of March 2023. And it begins right now. Niko na Winnie Mandela. Mimi namuita Winnie Mandela. Nimeona kuna jina tena Winnie Ogweno. Haya, appear there's a lady who is coming in, waiting for us so that we can start off this conversation together. But meanwhile, we will be off on that conversation. We will be speaking to Winnie meanwhile as we just get to understand the state of politics and also Pan-African economics, mainly. Politics and economy move hand to hand. Sure. Ajua watu nyinyi wa uchumi mpendangi siasa. Lakini kuna it is no option.
No, there's a correlation between politics and economics. I mean, we can't, ignore that fact. We can't avoid that fact, Yeah.
Right. So Africa seems to be, there's a lot of activity happening in Africa, of course, both on the economic fronts and also political fronts and social fronts as well. There seems to be a lot of robust activity in Africa. I reminisce of the 70s and the 80s. If maybe you didn't grow up, but if you had, or you read history books, you understand that a lot of activities around 70s and 80s in Africa, African countries, a lot of things were going on in terms of uchumi na pia siasa. All right, as usual, please like when we get to know that you're watching us, and not please share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. When you please like when we get to know that you're watching us, and please share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. Kama kaida tuende mbele za Mungu tuombe. Tukirudi basi tutakuja kuona nani ameweza kuamka. Winnie, utatuombea?
Okay.
Ulienda Sunday school?
No, I'm African religious.
Tuombe na hiyo.
Sasa nilikuwa naomba wewe uombe.
Tuombe Africa.
Leo naomba uombe.
All right, Father, come before this morning. We worship you, glorify your name. Thank you for another opportunity to be alive. We thank you for this broadcast, and we thank you for every tackler that's joining us this morning as they join in. You meet them at their point of individual needs. Even as we start off this conversation, may they edify the fabric of this country. We pray, trusting and believing. Amen.
Amen.
Haya, tayari umesema amen, so inamaanisha umeokoka sai. All right, good morning to you, Julius Kiambu watching. Asante sana. Langat driver, good morning. Check your inbox. Good morning to you, Langat. I'll check it. I'll check it out. Ruth Waidim watching from Nairobi. Asante sana. Good to see you. Kipchichi EK. Good morning, Gerald tuned in. Asante sana. Mzee Paul Bitok. Good morning, GB. Adetakol watching live from Merawet. Berea Moibena. Asante sana. Salimia watu wa mtaani. K.E. Patrick, good morning watching live. Kenya mambo imechemka kidogo. Mambo imezidi kidogo. Mzee naona ananiambia pole kwa homa. Be quick recovery. Asante sana. Tazidi kuwa sawa. We'll be okay. Mbona mingi hapa lakini najua huwezi jua kama ni homa pia ama najua Nairobi sasa kuna gas mingi. Gas is exchange.
Yeah.
You don't know which is which. But anyway, good to see you. Na mwingine anaweza kuamka hapa Abdi Nasi Masa. Okay. Hiyo nitasoma siku nyingine si kwa leo. Haya. Okay. Haya. Winnie, state of the nation. What's your feel of the nation? What do you feel the pulse of the nation is?
First of all, we've been having the demonstrations, as we are all aware of the repercussions of the demonstrations to the economy. And we have, if you talk about the state of the nation, let me just give the state of Africa outright.
Yes.
We've seen South Africa demonstrations, we've seen Tunisia, we've seen Senegal, okay? Worldwide demonstration against cost of living. You understand? And of course, we saw the South African demonstrations and how peaceful they were. We've seen the Kenyan demonstrations and how we've had a bit of chaos in the Kenyan demonstrations and call for boycotts of certain products in the country. You know the repercussions for calling for boycotts of products in the country. You know the repercussions of demonstration to investors, to the external investors in the country, and the economic shocks that come with the demonstrations in the country. You understand, and also the stock exchange, you understand, effect on the demonstrations that are currently happening in Kenya. Of course, the wananchi are at liberty to demonstrate against the cost of living if they feel they are not, happy with how the country is moving, you understand. But at the end of the day, we have repercussions. And it's just important my feeling is that it's important for the Kenyan leaders to come together to find solutions to our problems, because we are just from the COVID-19 pandemic. We've not recovered. When we were almost recovering, then we had the Russia-Ukraine war, effect on Africa. And then for Kenya now, for this matter, we then got into an election period, you understand? And the election period came also with its pros and cons, you understand? And effects to the economy, you understand? And so we've not even recovered from the shock from the election, in Kenya. And now we are having demonstrations, we are having riots, and we are having a lot happening in the country. And for me, in the spirit of Ubuntu and Pan-Africanism, I just request our leaders to put their pride aside and come together. We are blacks, man. We are Africans. The prosperity of Africa should be for all of us, you understand? We are past the age of silencing guns in Africa. You understand? Our great-grandfathers fought for the liberation of the continent. And I think their spirits are not happy with what's happening in Africa right now. You understand? So it's important for our leaders to embrace the spirit of Pan-Africanism and to understand that we are one nation, one people, and shake hands and come together and work for us and just for the happiness of the African people. The African child is hungry, you understand? So, I don't think what's happening in the country is right now, and I'm just hoping and praying that our leaders will be able to work together, to solve all this mess in the country. Yeah. Okay.
All right, before we proceed deeper into the conversation, we would want to know, what is a Pan-African movement that you are president of, and what exactly does it entail? What do you do on a day-to-day?
Like I've just mentioned right now, in Africa, we are past the age of silencing guns. We are not fighting oppressors or colonialists or something, you understand, or going to the bush to this. Of course, we have a few countries having issues here and there, you understand, but we are hoping and praying that all this will come to a stop. So as the Pan-African movement, our focus is on the economic liberation of Africa, understand? So we fight for the economic liberation of Africa. We fight for one-stop borders. We fight for trade within Africa. We fight for benchmarking within Africa, you understand? Like in January, I think we were in Congo as a Kenyan delegation through the Kenya Chamber of Commerce, you understand, to benchmark and see what Congo can offer Kenya and what Kenya can offer Congo. We have a Lusaka conference in May 18th to 19th, where we've invited a huge Kenyan delegation. All the in Kenya, we have regional economic blocks like LREB, so we bring them together and just find how we can go to Lusaka and then host different business people worldwide, the Arab, the Federation of the Chamber, Economic Chamber Arab. We invite Europe, we invite other African stakeholders in business, and Kenyan delegation just to go benchmark, get to know what somebody can do in your county, what you can do in Lusaka. Recently, you saw the Zambia-Kenya agreement on land, like how we can do agriculture, because we have land in Zambia, free land in Zambia. How can we do land? How can we do agriculture as an African people? How can we work together? How can we trade together?
There's free land in Zambia?
Not free, sorry. And that's a very wrong statement. Not free. We have vast land in Zambia, you understand? sorry. We have vast land in Zambia. Pole. No, not free, like vast land in Zambia, you understand? Available land. So we can always, go agree and see how we can do farming in Zambia. So as a Kenyan, I can go to Zambia? Yes, you can go to Zambia, of course, through the laws of the land, follow the correct procedures and laws of the land and do farming, you understand? And just how to liberate Africa economically and trade within ourselves, encourage trade within the African continent. You understand? Yeah, so that's what we are doing. So if you want to benchmark, let's say for agriculture, and then we get to know which country this and this and this. So that's how we do trade within Africa. Yes. So
what would you say are some of the things or some of the structures that are stifling economic growth in Africa? Because you're saying about the open border business. Of course, we continue to trade as a small unit in Africa. When there can be more power in cooperation. But anyway, I don't want to steal your thoughts. But what are some of the things that you think is stifling Africa from realizing its dreams, as you say?
First of all, we need to strengthen our economic blocks. Like if you look at the East African economic bloc, with the coming in of Congo, you know that East Africa is on the watch, for serious economic trade right now. And also, we've been trying to work so hard to ensure that these bottlenecks that are hindering trade within Africa, we try to kill them. Right now, if you look at the Northern Corridor, in East Africa, the Northern Corridor, Central Corridor, and the Southern Corridor of East Africa. We used to spend over 21 days to clear goods from the port of Mombasa to Kigali, Kampala, you understand? But right now we are spending approximately 4, 6 to 3 days to clear these goods under the customs union pillar of the one-stop border, you understand? And so then this also reduces the demurrage for the traders, you understand, and unnecessary extra expenses on importation and in their respective countries, okay? And also, we've also tried to work on infrastructure in Africa to facilitate trade, you understand? Like we have the Gambia-Senegal Bridge, we have the Corridor 13, Central African Republic, and the Republic of Congo, you understand? So we are trying to improve our infrastructure. Actually, the African Development Bank has set aside $78 billion to $108 billion, not set aside, trying to finance, to solicit finance for the African infrastructure. $78 to $108 billion, $108 billion that we will need for proper infrastructure in Africa to facilitate trade. And you've seen our heads of state lately in Africa are talking about Pan-Africanism, the passport issues, you understand? Because much as the visa is getting you income as a nation, but you realize that you are trying to kill trade by these unnecessary bottlenecks in getting visas, you understand? So we are trying to open up borders for trade through the Africa Free Trade. That's a Vision 2063 of the African Union, you understand? And of course, through the 4 pillars of the African Development Bank, which is to feed Africa, industrialize Africa, light up Africa, you understand? So we, as a continent, have a vision, you understand, of opening trade for our opening trade and facilitating trade in Africa. Okay. Yeah.
That is quite something. So, when you speak, of course, you're talking about Pan-Africanism and the conversation that has been for the longest time. It's not a new conversation.
Yes.
The issues of ensuring that you can mobilize Africa around common interest as a continent.
Yes.
And different countries and different leaders have had these conversations for the longest time.
Yeah.
And the closest that actually we ever got to having a Pan-African economic movement was during Gaddafi's time. And he seemed to have been very passionate about bringing up African countries one single currency, single passport, and to ensure you can have a more stronger economic bloc.
Yes.
But now, do you think African leaders only pay lip service to Pan-Africanism? Do you think there's some level of seriousness in pushing for that?
Maybe I could rate it at 40%, you understand? But we are trying to ensure that there's some level of seriousness when it comes to Pan-Africanism. And for us as a continent, of course, we have our vision, and our vision is the Vision 2063 African Union. That's what we are working towards. We have our bank, which is the African Development Bank, so we are using the pillars of the bank to achieve the vision of the AU 2063. And of course, as Kenya, we have the Vision 2030 that the head of state, of course, now then uses to see how we achieve our SDGs, okay? But then the problem of Africa is that I think we are becoming puppets of the West, you understand? Yeah. Because there's a clear role for IMF. The clear role for IMF is for macroeconomic stability. The social welfare of the people in Africa lies with the heads of state and the leaders of Africa, you understand? But most of the time, the leaders of Africa forget about the social welfare of the African people and leaves the mandate to IMF to dictate how they spend. You understand? Mm-hmm. Because expenditure will depend on what the needs of the country and the needs of the people. Even borrowing, you understand? The rates at which we are borrowing is very alarming. And the cost of borrowing is also very high. We don't have clear representation in IMF and SDRs, okay? And even if you look at the crisis, the 650 billion SDR allocation to Africa, where Africa only got 33 billion from the SDR, $33 billion from the SDR allocation. We've had serious problems. We had these discussions, and I think there was an agreement to have $100 billion reallocated to Africa through the Africa Development Bank to recapitate the African banks and financial institutions for us to move forward. So I think going forward, our African leaders should get to know that Pan-Africanism is real, and coming together as a people to work for the common interest of the Wananchi is very important, and to stop being puppets. When they go for these conferences to discuss issues, let's prioritize African issues. Let African business be our business, okay? Otherwise, we're headed to neo-colonialism, which is now going to be the economic colonialism of Africa. So yeah, it's very important for us to focus on our vision as Africa, which is Vision 2063, work towards that, and put the Wananchi's problems at heart, okay? Ubuntu, you understand? Yeah, but we are preaching the spirit of Pan-Africanism, and hopefully it will get to a point where all the leaders will be singing Pan-Africanism and working towards this. But it starts from somewhere. So us, we're on the journey, and we hope they'll join us. Yeah.
Don't you think that the proponents of Pan-Africanism are being a bit of ambitious? Because when you speak about these countries in Africa, there are countries that are still even struggling to bring their fabrics together in terms of their people, their local composition of people, the economy, trying to amalgamate the economy, and also even the social setup of people, politics and all that. There are still countries that are really struggling with that. Even look at where we are as a country now. You think about maandamanos every 2 days in a week. We have our own problems in terms of even coming together as a nation. Do you think bringing Africa together is a feasible dream? Do you think it's possible, really?
Yes, I think it's a feasible dream. The problem with Africa is that we have a few elite controlling the good people. You understand? A few elite. Like if you look at cases of Nigeria, a few elite controlling the oil. You understand? We look at cases of DRC Congo, a few elite trying to destabilize the economy, you understand? But the vision is there, except the few greedy, corrupt elite, you understand, who are puppets of the West.
But they are the ones who run the powers.
But the power belongs to the people, you understand? We are headed there. We are headed there,
It belongs to the people on paper.
Yeah.
Let's proceed.
Karibu. Yeah. So yeah, we are headed there, and that's why I'm saying for the economies that are a bit stable, it's important. You see that because we have to speak one language as African leaders. If the heads of state don't speak one language, it's difficult even to bring the other economies that are struggling. You understand, to come that are still LDCs. You understand, to even move to the position of MDCs. You understand, it's becoming a big challenge. Okay, but. That is why we are having regional economic blocks, where we are bringing babies in. In an economic block, some will be babies, some will be at LDC levels, some will be at MDC levels. And that is how we grow together as a people in the spirit of Ubuntu. If Congo can supply this for us, what can Kenya give Congo? What can Kenya give Uganda? What can Uganda give Kenya? That's why we need to strengthen the economic blocks and for our leaders to speak one language. Imagine like in East Africa, if we have Mheshimiwa Suluhu, Mheshimiwa Ruto, Mheshimiwa Kagame, and Mheshimiwa Museveni speaking one economic language on how to bring to strengthen the bloc, it would be nice. But the problem that we have very few elite, corrupt elite trying to, control the whole economy of Africa, and it's very sad. And these are the puppets of the West that I keep talking about. Yeah, it's very sad. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see the development that happens thereabouts, especially on that front of Pan-African movements and ensuring that we can have, Africa can try and unite more. And it's quite a task, if you ask me. It is quite a task because, like you're saying, the people controlling those units have their own very personal interest as well. Do we imagine that someone is saying, okay, I'll be ceding power? Maybe every time we talk about Pan-Africa, there's a time we talk about Museveni being, I think, the president of Africa. And just the thought of it
Yes.
And it sends shudders and shivers down your spine.
It goes as cheap as language barrier. Even the Francophone against the Anglophone, you understand? Even the financial systems, you understand? The other day I was having a discussion with one of the ambassadors, and I was asking, why can't we have MPESA and MTN Momo? Why can't somebody in West Africa transact using MPESA? If I see a commodity in West Africa and I want to buy, why can't I use MPESA? Why can't MTN Momo and MPESA integrate their systems, the financial systems, so that it's easy for us to just use MPESA or MTN to trade, to transact in Africa, you understand? And so we are still using the dollar, so we are being controlled, you understand? So it's a challenge, and I think going forward, African leaders should it's easy, man. Just come together and work for us, man. We have given you the powers to lead us. It's simple. Yeah, I don't understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see how that goes as well. Now, Kenya for the longest time has been seen as the big brother, especially within the East African economy. But now, looking at it in the larger scope of the continent, where do you think the space of Kenya now?
No, we are okay.
How are we okay? You answered Lou the other day saying
we are still the
jirani mwingine wetu struggling with this and that. Do you think Kenya is still commanding?
No. The liquidity buffer is still a problem. The liquidity buffer is still a problem in I think most of the African countries are still struggling with that. You saw what happened in Ghana recently. Okay, so and that is why if you look at the economic status quo right now, I think we are still doing well, much as we have the liquidity buffer and everything. And we recently had the cabinet wanting to repeal the 10 trillion debt ceiling in Kenya. And to increase borrowing, okay, to use the debt GDP get a percentage where we can now borrow. And I know Kenyans making too much noise about this. Okay, much as it has its cons, but sometimes if you look at the economy of Kenya, it has grown, you understand? So maybe the 10 trillion ceiling is not feasible for Kenya right now. We must therefore get a percentage, because the economy has grown, the GDP has grown. So then how then do we get a percentage to get to know how much we can borrow for the country? Because if we don't borrow, and then that means then we don't spend, and means then we don't have development in the country. Where the president the other day spoke about austerities and the 900 deficit we had, the debt deficit that we had in Kenya. Okay, I don't know how far he is with the 300 with the reduction by 300 to 600. I don't know where he is with that, but again, austerities can sometimes hinder and hurt people. Like if you put austerities in the health sector, in the education sector, then this is going to be a problem. Then that means when the Minister for Education wanted to increase the fee by three times, I think, university fee by 3 times, then it's going to hinder the people if you focus on austerities. It's just that we have a new regime that is just trying to put themselves together. But I hope that they have the Kenyan and the common wananchi's interests at heart and the economy's interests at heart, and that they're the right people to help us run the economy, okay, and fix the liquidity issues and everything, and just ensure that the economy is running well. The current government is 6 months old, and we are looking forward to, of course, bigger things from the president and more serious things when it comes to management. So we're just looking forward and hoping, but we are still the big brothers in East Africa, though. We are. So we are very positive and optimistic. You can't take that away from us.
Maybe first on the issues of the dollar, maybe it's time we went back to barter trade then. Cross over to Uganda. Napeleka kuku napewa ndizi.
No. We don't have to go back to barter trade. We don't have to go back to barter trade. We can still use the Chinese yuan. We can de-dollarize. You understand? We can de-dollarize, then use other currencies, accept other currencies, for trade, and then there will be competition for demand and supply, and then we are sorted. But if you base on one single economy, any small problem, then there is a lot of economic fluctuation.
All right. So Nekesah Waffulah also just joined us. She just joined us this morning. She's an agro-economist and a business development specialist. She'll be having a conversation with her this morning as well. She tells us what's happening on the front of agriculture as it is. This is a country tumesikia njaa ni mingi. Tumesikia njaa ni mingi. Lakini pia nimesikia tena tulikuwa nasema hakuna mvua. Asa wamelia, umesema mvua imekuja imebeba mchanga. We'll be having a conversation as well on the role of agriculture, of course, and ensuring that there is a more stable continental economy. And you mentioned about Zambia, that there's a lot of land there.
Yes,
and we are importing actually the maize from Zambia.
Yes.
As we speak, there's a very serious crisis on maize globally. But it's interesting that Zambia still has some stocks, I think, that are coming in through Tanzania. Stocks are running through Tanzania from Zambia and all that. When you were growing up, I don't know how many of you grew up when I was growing up. But we used to have the 4K club in agriculture. I mean, that time we used to hear that ukulima ni uti wa mgongo wa uchumi. Sijui ni wakati gani iliacha kuwa uti wa mgongo. Good morning to you, Waffulah. Nekesah, Waffulah.
Good morning, how are you?
Salama sana, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for hosting us.
Karibu sana. Malala kidogo.
Asante sana. Ni barabara za Nairobi hatujazoea.
Karibu sana. Just give you an opportunity as well to introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Nekesah Waffulah, as you've said, and I'm a business development consultant. And I'm in the agribusiness space, working with most of the agricultural companies and trying the best to, uplift farmers, working to ensure that they are also bankable and ensuring that they get financing in the future. And this, of course, it's a problem. We see a lot of problems in agriculture, and we are trying our best to ensure that farmers can be able to reach to that commercial production level. Okay. Yeah.
So how do you do that? How do you empower the farmer? You said you empower farmers.
So by empowering, we mean that we give them knowledge. Because you see, if you have the knowledge to be able to share it with those who do not have it, then that way you're empowering them. And empowerment it's not about, it's about taking what people know. Like, for example, there's a lot of research that is out here. And I would take, for example, the technologies that are there at Calro, the technologies that are there in the universities. We take this and we're able to, share with them, showcase, and be able to actually, showcase to them by practical. You don't just tell them that this is how it works, but you show them by planting. If, for example, it's something for planting, then you show them how it's planted, how it's used, and they're able to actually uptake these technologies and be able to improve their livelihoods. And also linking them to market, because it's not just about production. If they produce, they need to know where to sell. If they produce, they need to know that they are food secure. So we are looking at all aspects in terms of the food basket, what they take, and also the market in terms of where they sell. Okay. So it's a holistic, yeah.
All right. Well, to that, you're still depending on that on agriculture. Still on depending. Kama wewe ni mkulima, you are a farmer. Now that tuko na wakulima leo hapa, you are a farmer. Kama ni mkulima wa mifugo, hakikisha kwamba unapata chakula ya mifugo yako kutoka Fugo ama unga Farm Care East Africa Limited. If you are farming, kama unachunga kuku, hakikisha kwamba unachukua chakula ya kuku zako. Unapata kuku inaitwa chicken Fugo layers. Sure that you get the best quality eggs and also body weight on your chicken. Hakikisha kwamba iko shwari zaidi. Why should you get Fugo feeds? Because it's aflatoxin free. The biggest struggle that has been with farmers has been feed poisoning. Unaenda unanunua chakula, mifugo wanaanza kuwa na stomach ache, ama mifugo wanaanga stomach I get feed poisoning. So these are sure the food is very 100% safe for your consumption, for the consumption of your animals. And also the formulation of nutritional formula is scientific to ensure that it gives your animals a perfect balance of nutrition. Fugo feeds, malezi bora, mapato zaidi. Malezi bora, mapato zaidi. Please get to nearest Agro-Vet and ensure that you get your quality feeds from Unga Farm Care East Africa Limited. Fugo feeds, malezi bora, mapato zaidi. Haya, mambo ya ukulima. Tumerudi hapa. Why is it that the more, I would imagine that the more we advance, the more we produce. But you can imagine at this century, tunalala njaa even more than we used to be several decades ago. Njaa urenga, that, many years, decades during your grandfathers and all that, was unheard of. There was a lot of plenty. But do you imagine that as we continue to industrialize, we continue to get more knowledge on farming and all that, we produce more? Why are you producing less?
There are different factors, and especially if you look at the African situation right now, we have issues that are really big, and we start those issues with the soil. So you find that there's a lot of challenges when it comes to soil health, because we've been farming for so long. Like, for example, if you're talking about farming, I used to get like 40 bags plus per acre. But right now what we get is an average of around. We're still maintaining the same old methods that we used to use those days for production. Farmers are still using 1 bag of DAP, 1 bag of CN for top dressing, DAP is the planting fertilizer. That's what they've used. But we are not focusing on what are the issues that we have within our soils. How many farmers actually go out there to soil test? And we're talking not just in Kenya, but in Africa. How many farmers know the status of their soil health? How many farmers know that if I'm growing maize, I need X nutrition for my crops in a simplified way on some of these things. So if we can start focusing on issues, the real, dissect, we analyze what is the root cause of why we are getting where we are right now. Part of the issues is soil management issues. So, and I'm glad that the government has a soil management policy. You see, and that's where we need to start. How do we sort out our soil first? Then the other issue is using the same old technologies like seed. For example, I know Kitale, for example, has 614. That is the maize they know. If you tell a farmer to plant a different variety, it's like you're fighting them. So it's time that we started changing. Like this year, for example, the rains have started, but we know that they'll not be enough. For probably the maize production season. Why can't farmers move to probably the mid-altitude, seeds? How can we advise our farmers to be able to grow the right type of seed for the quantity of rain that we are receiving? So there are a lot of mixed issues, even training, extension. We know what happened during the 80s when the structural adjustment programs happened. They removed extension, that advice that is given to the farmers. That affected, the technologies or rather the information that goes to the farmer. It's demand-driven, not supply-driven. So it becomes an issue. How many farmers actually know where even their Ministry of Government of Agriculture offices are? So we have bigger issues than what we are seeing on the ground. We can give subsidy fertilizer, we can give free inputs and all that, but if we don't sort out the issues on the ground, then we'll have a challenge. We'll still get our 15 bags instead of getting 40. And trust me, there are farmers out there, especially commercial farmers, who are even getting 50 bags because they are doing the right thing. Why can't we emulate them? What are they doing that is right, that is not? Why is Zambia producing more? If you go to Zambia right now, right now they're going into the winter season. They have irrigation. So why are we different from them? We have rivers. Why can't we put in infrastructure for that? Before these heavy rains that we're experiencing, the short-term heavy rains, we had a lot of, a very long dry spell. Why didn't we dig dams? Why didn't we, just to prepare for that season? So we have issues that need a lot of integration between the ministries that would then help us to reach where we are supposed to go.
Okay. Yeah. Before we come back to the issues, of course, we are just speaking about the Pan-African economy of the continent at these days, and the factors that has contributed to its growth as a continent. What are some of the things that have held its economy up? And I would imagine that the biggest for the longest time has been agriculture and horticulture, which has been the biggest revenue exchange source. Yeah. Do you think agriculture still commands space in terms of continental economic growth and stability?
I would say yes, and in a big way. Okay. And if you look at how other economies have grown, not just in Africa, we had an agrarian revolution in Europe, in Americas, it's a step. And I always tell even my peers, if we cannot have an agrarian revolution, there's no way we are going to industrialize. I've written articles about it. And it's very sad that we are trying to skip to industrialization, yet we are forgetting what is the basic, where are we getting our raw materials from? So we need to focus first on growing our agriculture as a continent. And I like what she said about, specialization. If, say, for example, Zambia grows a lot of maize, why are we struggling to grow maize? We could as well just have another country grow the maize and we focus on what matters most for us. Maybe for us, it would be an industry setup where Kenya is, Kenya, we are ahead in terms of technology, in terms of industrialization, in terms of, all these things. How can we work as Africa? We are talking about the Africa Free Trade Continental Trade Area. How are we utilizing that? We are currently harmonizing all the regulations, especially in agriculture, towards Africa standards. How can we take advantage of that and utilize us as a continent? Because I believe in Africa we have everything we need to actually grow and grow our economies to a level which, is really, enviable. And if you look at even the Africa Development Bank report that was launched in January, they're talking about in 2023 and 2024, will be way ahead in terms of economic growth at 5.5%, which means we have potential. And all this has to start from agriculture, because most economies are actually agriculture driven, except for a few which are mining and all that, but most of the African economy is run by agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think, listen, Winnie,
Yeah.
I think, do you still think agriculture as it is still commands any respect in the economy?
It does. And actually, it's very sad that in 2022, I think we had over 20 million adults and 10 million children suffering from malnutrition in Africa, which is very sad. That's about 20% of the population of Africa suffering from malnutrition. And we are very happy that through the African Development Bank, African Union Commission, and the International Agricultural Fund, that came together to launch a facility for food security for Africa at the United Nations Summit. Where now they're going to set aside $1 billion to be able to cater for 40 million farmers, technology for 40 million farmers, and they're going to be able to produce 100 million metric tons of food to feed over 200 million Africans.
Yeah.
That's about 80% of the African population. So I'm happy that this is a topic in Africa. You saw the Dakar, Senegal meeting with the African Development Bank president and all the heads of state, all the African heads of state discussing agriculture the other day in Dakar, Senegal. So this is a discussion in Africa, and I'm happy that it is one of our pillars in the African Development Bank, that is to feed Africa, and one of our key agendas in the Vision 2063 of Africa. And we are headed there. Discussions are going on, talks are going on, and I can tell you for free, Africa is heading in the right direction when it comes to agriculture, and I hope that the heads of state will come together to make this a very critical issue and to educate the masses about the importance of agriculture, and that agriculture is not for the low-income earners or for the illiterates, and the youth should embrace agriculture. We should sensitize and empower the youth to accept agriculture and to know that this is the backbone of our nation, and a hungry nation cannot be economically viable. And also to empower our women in the agricultural sector, because at the end of the day, in Africa, we believe that women are the producers of the land, because we own the womb, you understand? So we are the producers of the land. We are the producers of the seed of Africa. So it's important to empower even more women to come and accept and embrace agriculture for us to move forward as a continent. Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's something that she mentioned about, and it's about the revolution. Revolution and evolution. And there's something that she had mentioned as well when you're coming in, and it's the impact, the influence of the West on Africa and its affairs, on how it runs its economy, how it runs its social, how it runs its politics, how it runs also its finances and all that. Now, when you speak about the Grand Revolution, the West has majorly gone through most of its revolutions, be it industrial or agri. And I think should be now in the fourth revolution, which is industrial. Now, Africa is still not at par with the Western world. When it comes to policies and frameworks that are made, they are made majorly by the West for Africa. Now, some of the things that I've always had an issue with personally is the issue of the evolution of energy. And the Western world has progressed largely in terms of energy, moving away from fossils to now maybe nuclear and to the other forms of renewable energies. Africa still is struggling with the basic in terms of energy generation. The biggest critics on Africa has been the policy that is made in the West and actually it's implemented down here. For instance, talk about coal. For the longest time, the Western world has run on coal to do its industrialization for cheap power, to run its factories and to run its processing and manufacturing industries. When you go to the US, there's still areas where they use coal largely. When you go to Europe, they use coal largely. But now when they come to Africa, they tell us we cannot use coal. While for us, we are decades and decades back in terms of revolution. We need to be allowed to do our own revolution. I tend to be a bit of a radical when it comes to global economics. And because I feel like you're telling a child to run with you. A grown-up child, we need to run together. And you're telling the child you cannot rest because sisi tulisonga, it's not good for your heart. But now the adult the capacity, they can take more. So even as you have these conversations, when it comes to policy, you're speaking about all those conversations and the gatherings that happen of leaders, they happen majorly in the West, sponsored by the West. on policies that are friendly to the West. Is it the responsibility of Africa, for instance, to protect the environment, but it's the imperative and responsibility of the West to industrialize? Like they can do their own industries, they can do the pollution, because they are the major contributors of pollution in the world globally. But now they come back, they give us carbon credits to plant trees and to clean up the pollution. Even as we speak about the economics and agriculture, for instance, and everything that revolves around that and the revolutions, what is the danger that you could be using the wrong policies in the right nation or in the right continent?
I would say, first of all, we do not need to take policies as they come from the West. We need to adopt and adapt them to our situation. There are some things that are good, some things are not favorable. I mean, if you look at how the Asian world has been growing, they take those policies but adapt them to themselves. Some of them even rejected. Why are we accepting? Is there something that we don't know? And I always keep asking, why is it that if you go to, say, for example, the World Bank website, you'll get reports for other countries, like how much they've been given, how much has been spent. Yet when you come to African countries, there's actually nothing, or very few countries would actually, have their reports up there. So it's also upon us as a people in the country, or even in Africa, to push our governments to do this. We have the right as citizens. We don't need to adopt everything that comes. And I can give a very good example with the Kenyan policies. Most of the policies right now are kind of inclusive, because you find that it's not just government discussing them. There's private sector there. There is, the consumer protection groups are there. So it's actually inclusive. So the only challenge we have is that you'll find that when it's in circulation, it's only probably you and me who can get those policies, because we have access to internet, we have access to, so many facilities, which probably the rural person does not have. And I think that's where now the politicians come in. How can we engage them so that they also are able to disseminate this information to their constituents? How can they make it in a simplified way? Because some of those policies are very complicated. How can we make them understand in a way that now it's even more participatory, so that it's more adaptive to our situation? So some policies are good, but again, as you said, we are children. We can't start running, yet we have an adult who is running. It's a process. Industrialization is a process. And I believe we are probably at a certain step, and we shouldn't just jump, say, 10 steps to be where probably the US, Germany is, and yet we are supposed to be at a certain level. I always say there's no hurry in growth or development. If we have a budget as a country, let's focus on that budget for growth. And the only thing I would really stress is how can we reduce this corruption so that we can now grow in a way that, would be sustainable for us as a country. And I would take the case of like Ethiopia, Rwanda. Those have focused, they might have borrowed. She's talked about debt ceiling and, breaking, opening it up and all that. They are focused. They are reducing. How can we reduce our expenditure on things that might not be positive for our country to be able to divert this money to things that are more positive for our growth as a country? So if we can be able to focus on this, I believe we can head into the right direction. And those policies can be taken. We have the best policies. And I think you looked at, if we take our policies, economic policies for the 80s, that's what grew Malaysia, that's what grew Singapore. Why aren't we at the level of Singapore and Malaysia? What happened? What did they do different from us? Yet we had the same plans, they just took them. Actually, most people take policies from Kenya. Most African countries wait for Kenya to come up with policies. They just take and implement. What is wrong with us as a country? So there's so much that we need to really review as a country, as a people, to be able to reach to those levels that we need to. Yeah.
So you guys are just manufacturing policies for other
No. We are also creators of policies. Yeah. When we go for these forums in Africa, when we come together, we come up with policies in tax, in debt, and actually we facilitate different African governments with these particular policies and just pray for implementations. Of course, we have to use the legislators to find how they implement certain policies, especially in tax, illicit financial flows. We have Tax Justice Network Africa. We have Africa Forum for Debt Network. Yeah. We are always coming together to come up with policies and facilitate our different African governments with these things to ensure that there's implementation and they're incorporated into the different policies, into public finance, public procurement, audit, all these audit policies to ensure that Africa is running smoothly. So we are also creators of policies, and that's why she's saying that most of the African countries benchmark in Kenya for the policies. You understand?
Benchmark in Africa, Kenya.
I mean, no, Africans, and they benchmark in Kenya.
Or
yes.
Kenya, Africa.
Kenya, yes. We are still the big brothers, Gerald. I told you, we are still the big brothers.
Hopefully.
We are.
When I get back to Waffulah, I would want to understand the issues. You mentioned, of course, the challenges in agriculture, and I mean the culture that comes with farming, and the issues that we have in terms of even of governance. Because I think the biggest enabler or stifler in terms of agriculture could be government most of the time. Because when you are talking about the agriculture being the backbone of the economy, the government, you could feel the government is getting very involved in that. But anyway, we'll come back to those issues. But I want to speak to Winnie on the African resource, which is population. Majorly, it's becoming majorly young people below the age of 35. Probably from 19, that's when you start being productive, to 35. Lakini pia unajua Kenya pia kuna vijana wazee. Unasema sisi kama vijana. Anyway, now in the strict terms of the population as a resource, because the biggest resource of a nation is its population, its people, its demography. Now the greatest percentage of Africa's or the continent's human resource is young people. Now you're speaking about agriculture, that someone says mtu anakaanga anasema maisha yakikuwa ngumu mimi narudi kulima. It's not one of those things that you want to do. I know a lot of young people are doing amazing things in agriculture. I know someone who's doing breeding, making millions out of it. Someone who's doing horticulture and all that. But now agriculture largely has been seen as that thing that doesn't come with dignity. Unaenda kufanya kila kitu imekwama. Sasa unaenda kulima sasa. How do we get more young people to embrace agriculture and production, food production, as an activity, an economic activity with dignity?
Yes.
Yeah? Even when the generation mimi mkulima, you're going somewhere in a forum or in a social space, like, I'm a farmer, people will not give you a lot of respect. How do we have more young people to embrace farming and also to ensure that we can dignify farming? How do we do that?
Okay, first of all, let's start with the infrastructure in farming, okay? From the national government perspective, I think the role of the different national governments is to avail the relevant infrastructure for farming. Like we now have the Bass Bankonki irrigation, rice irrigation scheme in Madagascar. We have the what is it called? The Turkana. This is a solar panel, a project in Turkana. You understand? All these things to facilitate agriculture, because you see, like if we avail the solar panels for agriculture, then we are going to be able to keep the farm produce for us. We are going to be able to irrigate. You understand? So as a national government, that is the first role, the infrastructure that is going to be able to facilitate agriculture. But also for the youngest population, what are we using them for? How are we empowering the young population? When you call them for mandamano that there is a cost of living crisis in the country, are you sensitizing them on the importance of agriculture? Because now the rains have come, okay? So you have them, you have access to them. Apart from the slogans, the issues, the political issues, are you also trying to sensitize them that agriculture is very important and the rains are here with us and you must be farmers? Are you creating a revolution for agriculture? Okay, there's no unga in the country, the prices are very high, but are you telling them why the prices are high, understand? And what we need to do as the young people. You people need to come together, revolutionize the country in agriculture, do this in agriculture. We're empowering them. And then all the young people, most of them, the 3/4 of the population of the young people are on social media. How are we using our social medias as influencers? I'm not an influencer, but people who have mass following, you understand? How are you using your spaces, your social media spaces to ensure that the youth are aware of the importance of agriculture? The Ministry of Agriculture, what is it doing? Is it holding lectures, public lectures in universities? Is it empowering the universities to realize that agriculture is not for illiterates, or it's a matter of civil education, understand? To educate our youth that agriculture is the backbone. Before anything, it is agriculture. And you cannot do nothing if you are hungry. Let us try to empower our youth and not misuse our youth. Okay, even when you're using them for political gains, but let's try to empower our youth and ensure that the revolution, the food revolution in Kenya and Africa is real, you know, and we fight for the revolution and the production of food in Africa. And let's stop being importers, but also producers of food. Because when you produce your food, you appreciate, you know, what you used to produce, you know, the quality of what you are consuming, the seeds and everything. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, Nekesah, now, before we get to the issues, I would like to, you are a young person. I'm sure these conversations on agriculture and farming, you're more likely to have it with young people in setups and forums and spaces like that. You're more likely to engage young people more than our folks. And given that you're also in the modern space, as it is now, what are some of the things that you hear young people talk about? When you talk to them about agriculture, what do they say?
I think people, it's the perception. Because as you've said, when you talk agriculture, people relate it to farming. But I can tell you for free.
Not
no, it's not. There's so much more. There's so much more. There's so much more in agriculture that people don't understand.
Agriculture
and I'll tell you for free. When I took my first course was horticulture, and when I changed from law to horticulture. Wow. And one of my relatives told me, "You want to be a farmer?" And I told him, "No, I have my purpose." You know, 4 years studying horticulture, studying plants. But then what young people need to realize is that when you do an agricultural course or a horticulture course, it doesn't mean that you end up being a farmer. There are so many professionals in agriculture. And I'll give you one, which I ended up in, but I moved off. Microbiology. There's microbiology in horticulture, in agriculture. There's pathology in agriculture. What I always say is if you're a doctor for humans, the same thing is like you're a crop doctor in agriculture. So you can be in different professions, in different specializations in agriculture. Farming is just one of them. And even with farming, you need agronomy knowledge. Agronomy is a course. You need crop science. There are breeders. Calro has breeders. All these CG centers, when you're talking about the consultative groups of researchers, they need scientists, they need agriculturists. Where are we going to get them? If say like, I think last year, we had no students of agriculture at Kabete. Like we had zero. So where are we going to in terms of young people? So when we are speaking to young people, it's about giving them the options that are there in agriculture. It's not an easy course, so they shouldn't just think it's about going there to become a farmer. And also what I always question, and especially when you look at the big organizations, why are you portraying the farmer as an old, rugged person on the cover of your books? Yet we have farmers, like for example, Gilad, who's doing onions, the garlic in Kajiado. Why can't he be on the cover and, talk about what he's doing? We have Zed farmer in Zambia. Why can't she be there talking about her potatoes and the tomatoes that she's growing? Yet these are young people, in the age groups of young people, and who are doing very well in agriculture. So I think it's also the picture that has been put out there.
The branding of agriculture.
Exactly. So it's about the branding, and we're trying to also change that and tell them, you know what? It's not about that old. Agriculture is not about the old person in the village who probably is doing subsistence farming. If we are in agriculture, say Ministry of Agriculture is pushing for kilimo biashara, then why are we pushing to put the cover of the advertisement of agriculture as a farmer who has a torn t-shirt and looking very old and frail? Yet that's not the case. So it's the perception, and we need to change that.
There also even sometimes also be people in the media report.
Exactly.
As they say, Nekesah, 27-year-old, leaves a lucrative bank job to go and farm.
Exactly. So the banking is actually put as the lucrative job, yet farming can be lucrative. You're right.
So in short, they are saying you're downgrading. The branding around agriculture as well needs to change. Now, the issues. What are the issues in agriculture? Especially kilimo biashara, agribusiness. What are the challenges in production?
There are quite a number, as I started saying. One of them is infrastructure. She has mentioned it. And I'll take a case study. If you look at most of the countries that are really well developed in agriculture, they open up new lands. And when they open up new lands, they put in place water and electricity. Why water and roads? Those three things. Why those three things? Because if I'm a farmer, and they actually make you as a farmer to put in place a proposal what you're going to do with the farm. So it will not be a case of me taking 100 hectares of land and then it stays idle for the next, 100 years. But it will be me taking and making something out of that land and ensuring that I'm also maintaining the soil as I do my production. So they've put in place roads, electricity, and water. What does that mean? As a farmer, I'll go in, I'll find there's water, whether it rains or not, I'll still do my farming. If I'm to do a crop production cycle, I'll make sure throughout the year I have something I'm producing. And that's an issue right now. Very few countries are doing that in Africa. Very few. And by few, I mean probably South Africa, maybe Zambia, Zimbabwe. Those are the ones that are probably doing very well. Maybe North Morocco, Egypt. If you come down, maybe Ethiopia. So as a country, we need to look at how can we produce throughout the year. Which crops actually can do well under irrigation? Because if you're talking of irrigating maize, then think about the population per square meter. I always question and ask, why do we plant 75 by 45 in terms of the spacing? Because that's what farmers plant. If you go to North Reef right now,
the spacing
of maize, 45, 75. In between the rows, wamejua hata wanajua hizi ni futi mbili, futi moja. So why do we plant like that? If you go to Zambia, if they plant their maize, you can't even walk in between that maize. You see, what happens is we need to now start looking at production per square meter. What are we applying on our soils? How are we taking care of our soils so that they're sustainable? So that if I'm growing maize maybe next season, I also get maybe the same or higher number of bags per acre, if I'm talking about per acre or per hectare. So that's first, infrastructure. And that it lies solely on the government. We cannot escape. It's the government to put in place those infrastructure. If you're talking of, for example, our cash crops, tea, coffee, if they don't have proper roads, how are they going to ensure that the tea is getting from Kericho in that deepest or that highland area to the nearest factory in a good way such that tea is not spoiling on the road? How are we packaging things like the transportation? Those are policies now, transporting these tea leaves from the factory, from the farm to the factory. How are they packaged? When I drive, when I'm in Kericho, you find a truck is overtaking you, the leaves are flying all over. I mean, that's wastage. And also, it means that probably that's not the best way to transport the tea leaves. If you're just on the highway, the A104 as per GPS, potatoes coming from central Kenya, they are heaped, and even more than what the policies, are stating, 50 kilos. Transportation, those are now policies. How is the government implementing and ensuring that we have proper storage, proper transportation, cold storage where it's necessary? So that's, again, infrastructure. That's one. And infrastructure also leads to things like dams. How are we strategically positioning ourselves as a country? We have, like now it's raining. All that water is going to the ocean. Then in a few months, we'll be crying there's drought in Turkana, drought in Isiolo. Let's jazz a lorry to take food to Isiolo. And that also is partly geographical distribution of these resources that we have. Because why would I be in Nairobi and we have Trans Nzoia where there's a lot of tomatoes, a lot of food, probably even being wasted, which can be shipped to Turkana. But because of insecurity, now we can't ship food to Turkana. But we are now jazzing a lorry from Nairobi to ship to Turkana. So we also have to look at security, transport, logistics, basically. Also, our logistics are very high. If you look at even cost of fertilizer, I think more than 20% of the cost is due to logistics. How can we reduce that? Fuel, taxes, all these things. One time we have taxes on fertilizer, one time it's removed, the other time it's returned on agrochemicals. So it's really confusing right now to say that agriculture can be sustainable or even ensure that it's meeting, it's contributing to the GDP the way it's supposed to if we have all these things on the ground. That is basically it. Of course, policies come in. Policies are also linked to all these things about infrastructure. There's extension. Extension is also a policy issue because it's the government to determine we want extension back. Ethiopia took graduates and employed them, and now they are providing extension services to the people on the ground. So they are trained and then they deliver. So they're like agents of the agricultural system. So if I'm a farmer, I'll talk to my nearest graduate who probably speaks my language, who probably will explain it the way I would understand. What are we doing in Kenya? How are we making sure that we have these networks that are ensuring that we have, that extension? Some companies are trying, and this is mostly driven by private sector. Mm-hmm. You find that they have agripreneurs on the ground. Maybe some of them don't have agricultural background, but they empower them. So companies come together, train them, and they're able to deliver to the farmer. But again, some of this can be biased, because if I'm a company selling fertilizer, I would want my product to move. Yeah. So it's kind of biased. So how do we get that, neutral ground where a farmer gets information and the right information for that matter? So extension, policies, infrastructure, issues around geographical distribution, issues around development in agriculture, allocation of 10%, and that one I will stress, 10% of our budget to agriculture, because we are not yet there. Currently, we are below actually 1%. If you talk about agriculture alone, because they lump agriculture, irrigation, everything together and tell us we have 10%. But that's not the case. What finance is going to Calro? Zero. Or maybe, I don't know right now. But basically, they're not getting finance. They get funding from outside. How can we ensure that our researchers get funding so that we are not being pushed by external forces to drive agendas that are not pro our country? Yeah, so we have good researchers, we have good breeders in the country who can give us good products. How can we support them? And everything starts from there.
So why are we still struggling with all those things you've mentioned about the human resource, the thinking that you said is top-notch? Winnie has even said we are even exporting policies and knowledge. Yeah. We have land. I don't think there's a shortage of land in this country. We have all these things that you've said. The Bible would say working for our own good. So why is it not working for good when it comes to production? Why are we not seeing the end of it coming? Why couldn't it want production parliament?
I think it takes two to tango. Okay. We need government to come in. We need also the farmers and those who are trained in agriculture to come in. If we all decided to work for a purpose as a country, I think we can achieve it. And if say government has also goodwill, say for example, we are currently even fighting subsidies and it's causing a shortage in fertilizer right now because everybody now is holding. We don't even know if farmers are saying we have applied, we have been given the message to go and take for fertilizer. When you reach there's no fertilizer. So, it's a good project, but is it sustainable? We also need to sit down as a team, those consultative teams include, private sector, include government, to ensure that we are all working towards a common goal. Because if I am in private sector and today I want to, maybe government approaches me to supply for the subsidy program, I also have my profits to make. How is government making sure that I'm still in business tomorrow? Because we need each other. I'm paying taxes as a private sector. Government also wants to ensure that we have food security. How do we work for a common ground? And I think those are the discussions we need to have. We stop, pointing fingers at each other and focus on a common goal. So it's about the people who are in that industry. How do we work together for a common good? How do we ensure that everybody is in business? If we're talking Kilimo Biashara, those players along the value chain, whether horizontal or vertical, how are they also working to make sure that they're still in that business and we continue in terms of growing our agriculture?
All right. Winnie, I would like you to tell us about, what are some of the projects that are active, especially in the continent, that are tailored towards spurring agriculture and trade as a catalyst for economic growth. But even before that, then what are because she has mentioned that even the interventions that we are having now are not well thought out in terms of reversing the issues of unproductivity. Now, what are some of the really key interventions that you think, especially government, because that is the biggest influence in terms of policy and action? What are some of the interventions, very serious interventions, deep interventions that you think would be very key in turning around agriculture and generally trade?
Okay. First of all, in Africa, we have the African Development Bank working towards the Noor Power Project in Morocco. And I told you about the Bas Bankonki rice irrigation scheme in Madagascar. And we have also the, what is this called? The Niger Power Project, what is it called? I just forgot its name, you understand? But Africa is really focused towards the infrastructure bit of agriculture, just to be able to facilitate for us to have water for irrigation, to have storage facilities, you understand, in the dry areas, and also drought-resistant crops, you understand, in areas like Turkana, in Ethiopia, some dry parts of Ethiopia, where we've had cereals, a few cereals being taken there to be grown, and for us to increase on the production of food in agriculture, okay? And also policies, okay, the agricultural policies. I think every country should just make sure that these policies are firm and favorable for the farmers. She talked about the tax, issues. Today you have this on fertilizer, tomorrow this, and then there's too much confusion in the sector. So I feel, especially in Kenya, the ministry should be very focused and keen on these policies and ensure that at least they're favorable for the common farmer in Kenya, of course, and large scale, middle scale, and all the farmers across the country. So apart from the infrastructure bit of it, we spoke about sensitization, why it's important for the African continent to be sensitized about agriculture, and about the available opportunities in agriculture, in tech, and in everything. Because I think in the Bible says people perish for lack of knowledge. You understand? So it's important to go and find out information. Go to the ministry, go to the respective places, get information. What's going on in the agriculture? What are the current trends? What are the current economically viable produce, for us to focus on, okay? So it's important for us to find out this information and not just farm blindly, okay? Yeah, so that is also important. And also the heads of state and the different leaders in the country to emphasize on agriculture. As you are holding rallies to do this and this, please also try to ensure that to emphasize on this thing called agriculture. Otherwise, the food security issue is going to be a continuous cycle. Like it's going to be a cycle. Like every day we are going to talk about the cost of living, about agriculture and food and everything. Yes, so it's also that is also very important. And also when I talk about the infrastructure, the policies, we talked about the one-stop borders and issues, how we can ensure that these produce are able to move freely without too much interruption. There's too much tomatoes being produced in South Sudan, by the way. But the South Sudan has too much tomatoes, for your information. By the way. But it's difficult for the tomatoes to get to Kenya, you understand, for example. And also, how do we manage waste in agriculture? We have a lot of tomatoes going bad in the markets and everything. How do we, how are we able to collect all these things, make tomato powders, and make sure that they are in the supermarkets and we can processed, and we can use powders instead of the real tomatoes. So it's important also for us to find how we manage waste in that sector. Okay. Yeah.
Nekesah.
Yes.
Any interventions that you think would work?
I'll just add on to what she's saying about value addition, critical, because we have times when we have peak seasons. Yeah. And during these peak seasons, like now, the mango season is almost over. We're going into the citrus, then tomatoes, and maybe cabbages. Then we'll have news about cabbages going bad in Nyandarua, potatoes. We'll have issues about mangoes in Makueni going bad. How can we probably dry this? There are facilities, there's a lot of solar drying happening. Okay. How can we ensure that we have those small cottage industries? And with the cottage industries, that's how we'll get to industrialization. And that's I think a step we've missed. I know the ministry is trying to push a lot on value addition, and I think we just need to support and know how to do this. Kirdi is doing a lot of training on value addition. How can we get those tomatoes she's talking about into tomato paste?
From Sudan?
Because if actually we had a map of Africa with when these seasons are happening across which countries, then we'd know. If say, for example, why is Zambia having excess maize? Because when they harvest, they put them in those vacuum bags. So they are not attacked by pests. They are ready. They are ready to sell when there's low season or high season in low season in Kenya. So they can ship some maize to us. if say Sudan has those excess tomatoes, how can we as a country probably buy from them and make paste out of it, dry it, as she said, powder, maybe use it during off-season? I know most Kenyans would not want to use powdered tomato, but there's potential. Yeah, I snack on dried mangoes, instead of eating crisps. How can we promote this in schools so that when kids are going to school, they're eating healthy, instead of taking those things that they take, sweets and all? Can they take 3 pieces of dried mango? 1 kg of dried mango is 10 mangoes. So you can imagine if